So the second part is now going to be the poem. Before I go into the poem, I just really want to thank the Murfreesboro Little Theater. I want to thank everybody who organizes poetry in the borough. I'm gonna mess this up. I know Amy and I know Corey, and I know there's another person who I've not met. I'm very sorry. To that person as well, thank you for having me. And thank you for letting us do this in like a different way. I thought it'd be fun. And thank you all of you for coming here through braving the storm, which is sort of apropos given the story. I messed up in that I forgot to order books, so I don't actually have a single book to sell. I know, right? So I'm going to make myself into a little Amazon when this is over. You can just come and order from me. We'll put your address down. It's $20 cash or credit. Either way, your no credit, your no cash excuse doesn't work tonight. And I will send you a copy of the book with a special little gift that I think will be meaningful. So my bad for not having books to have for you guys. Okay. So the poem, what's interesting to me about this series, There I Was, is, do you ever go to a poetry reading and the person gets up there and they're like, let me tell you a story of this poem, and then they tell you the story and you're like, that's a great story, and then they read the poem and you're like, I know, you just told the story. You know, what really excites me about this is that I think you'll see there are a lot of differences between the telling of the story and the telling of the poem. There are differences in like literal details, and you know, me and Dad argue about this. Sometimes I'm like, no, it happened this way, no, it happened that way. You know, so it's like it's really interesting, but it's also just like the things that you notice and the ways that verse changes the way that you talk about the world, and the way that you see it, and the way that you represent it. So I find it sort of fascinating. I hope that when I finish the poem, you're not like, yeah, the story was way better. But it's a good story. It's a good story. Without further ado, this is Lost Creek Cave. First, travel east 70 plus miles from my home. Then wait for the telltale fog to rise from the banks of the Caney Fork, which snakes beneath I-40 6 times in 6 miles. Turn south. Follow the Kilcalf tributary to a town so small, one year it's called Star City, the next year, 3 Eagles Crossing. Now travel 15 years into the past. Track the coos of mourning doves you once believed were owls retired in the transom of the mulberry treetops. Listen, hand cupped to ear, for the scamper of squirrels up the pale-necked sycamores. Look east for the sun. As it releases its ballast to rise above the pines, the helix snails feelering from the underside of dawn, and the talons of night stalkers clicking shut as field mice and voles squabble for seed, the basin of the Star City sink, dished like a crater in the dense landscape. Shade your eyes and you will find us. John and my father, best friends, and Peter and me, side by side before the crooked black spiracle of the cave, a gold disc of light strapped to my forehead as the dim blue vein of Lost Creek cascades from the rim at our backs, scoops from the Tennessee bedrock, the swimming hole we dog-paddled those summers despite the inward tug of its waters, Lost Creek slipping those secret causeways into the earth. My father's telling consults the map, one of many he framed to the kitchen's sheetrock with strips of trim and a few tacking nails. Tennessee, a parallelogram. Mill Creek and the Little Harpeth and all the other trout-steamed streams we anglered, felt-tipped to wrinkled paper. An X scrolled to note the highest peak of the Smokies, Lost Creek Cave, a circle drawn in my father's hand to the dead center of White County. There, beneath, where water stands in pools so clear it seems suitable only for the holy. There, beneath, where miles of rim pools are sculpted by earth drip, and acres of onyx branch down from low ceilings. Our only light, the quicksilver beams of our halogens, as we belly these opaline flows of stone, hands and knees along these chenes and sluices, grooves and rock like whorls warped into wood. This is a story we tell together, father and son, most recently at my sister's wedding, where I watched him walk her down the aisle we fashioned from borrowed folding chairs in her backyard, the two of us in her kitchen, a little bit later and a little bit drunk, as my father conjured Lost Creek Cave before us, which curves beneath itself, he says, like a ram's horn, drawing the spiral of a corkscrew in midair. The cave's perfect center, now balanced on my father's fingertip, where silver sheets of water spill from the stone firmament, like rain through a buckshot tin roof. And where John, Peter, my father and I approached that dark waterfall, our reflections fluttering like hummingbird wings in its waters, each of us seeking from that blackness another self, each of us a beacon, each of us a gold nimbus of fire. Now, it seems obvious to my father. The cave bats tucked into the heights, driftwood the size of caskets, smoothed down to their alluvials, countless skulls of wild boar and deer antlers scattered like offering on high shelves of stone. But how we could have known 3 storms met that afternoon above White County, I do not know. There is something within us, I say. Some other sense, my father adds. When wriggling miles deep through a squeeze in the cave, my headlamp blinked out and everything went quiet. Fumbling with my lighter, it was as though I dropped into the hollow skirt of a bell. The earth thumping in its chest like the first shovelfuls of soil on a grave, I was thrust into the spark of steel and white gas, thumbs singed by the spool of burning flint, and I heard a sound like the sound of stone against stone. A rush like diving off a lake dock in the middle of the night. A sound like the sound of all the old laws flooding back, the tablets drugged by some mute creature across the cave bottom, each chiseled syllable of God tapping out its code into stone as I, scrambling backward through the crawl space, felt along mica grooves and instinct back through the squeeze, through the dark, until finally I found them again. John, Peter, and my father, side by side on a ledge overlooking the cave's main passage, the crest and curve of white water rapids blocking the way home. But why would you do this? My uncle, Richard specifically, asks. This is a story of my father's near second death by water. Why this life, not a life without death's clang from time to time between the years? No one knows what holds the balances. Why our children don't float too deeply into their dreams. Why the Mississippi floods each spring to feed the farmlands. Why drawbridges don't collapse on the bows of motherships. Who is it out there balancing the earth like a basketball on its fingertip? This time, there is no darkness. This time, we're in my sister's kitchen, the redolence of coffee drifting by in dust motes. This time, our lives are certain. No echo, no water, just my father and me, surrounded by family and wedding guests, my sister in her beaded gown, he in his fitted tux. This time, the late May sun slants through my sister's kitchen windows to splash across us in glazed right angles of light. And it's just my father and me, who link arms and step out into the flooded cave passage, and are swept upward and back by the surge. My father indicating the water's height with the edge of his palm, as times as high as his chest, me leaning forward like a sprinter sprung from the blocks. This, a story I dare not tell without my father. Fearful, we'll be sucked back into that earth, and we'll slip back into that place of black water, of siege and surge, of echo, echo, echo. Fearful, but this time, disoriented, will allow that rare river to tow us back to the waterfall, which will part its curtains before us. And this time we'll see our doubles, our dream selves just beyond. John, Peter, and my father gesturing, come, come. As we march forward, linked at the arms like metal links of chain, my father shuffling to keep his footing, and me crying out over and over, keep moving, keep moving. This, the only sound above the rip of rapids as we become lost forever in those dark wakes. My father's favorite part of the story is how, when light finally broke around a bend in the cave, he turned to look at me and saw me for the first time. Sometimes I wonder if we're not still there. John, Peter, my father and I, waterlogged, exhausted, jubilant, the flooded cave entrance a whisper at our backs. Peter, my best friend who I met on the front steps of kindergarten, my best man, nearly homeless on his 23rd birthday, Peter, who now has a child. John, whose hair turned brown to silver by the age of 30. Whose daughter leapt 10 years ago from a building and we never saw her again. My father, who plants a garden each spring, tomatoes, a row of basil, greens, 3 for corn, green pole beans planted at their feet to scale sunward the yellow and white cob stalks. My father, who edges closer to his last days. And I, who ask you to take my hand like the seeds I poured from their paper pouch and tucked in rows into April's slowly warming matter. I who promise to protect you, to bring you out if you will promise to enter. Lost Creek Cave, a serpentine of water streaming in from the north like a stream trailing after its balloon battered in the wind. Put this poem down, I ask. Let it float like an arc. Stand up. Close your eyes. Take a step forward. Imagine you are walking through the water.